Good morning and welcome to a special edition of Grid Live Pre-Race. I'm Adam Lemerise and with me is Kobe Lambeth from the Podium Finish. We have 6 hours of racing on the schedule today at historic Watkins Glen International in upstate New York. It's the seventh round of the 2022 IMSA WeatherTech SportsCar Series Championship season and the third round of the Michelin Endurance Cup. Only the Petit Le Mans at Road Atlanta remaining after today's Sahlen's 6 hours of the Glen. First, a special shout out to our Patreon supporters, Colin, Mark, Michelle, and Robin. Thank you for investing in Grid Network. Link to our Patreon in the video description below. And leave a comment in the chat box and tell us who you think will win the race overall. Kobe, we have a solid 48 car field this year at the Glen.
Yeah, solid 48 car field, and really nice to see those numbers creeping up there again. I know in the last several years we've seen the numbers, down in the high 40s, into the 30s, and really nice to see sports car racing really booming right now in North America. And I really expect it to start booming next year when we get into the new era of prototype racing, when we have the Lmdh and the Lmh cars going for the overall wins in the IMSA WeatherTech SportsCar Championship and the FIA World Endurance Championship, but we're going to talk only about IMSA today. And we're seeing a close battle for the DPI title between two accurate teams, Myers Shank Racing and Wayne Taylor Racing. 7 cars entered in the top category at Watkins Glen, all 6 full-time entries, including the return of the number 48 Action Express Ally Cadillac DPI. Tom Blomqvist and Oliver Jarvis lead the standings by 10 points over Ricky Taylor and Felipe Albuquerque. Myers Shank Racing has a 96-point lead over Chip Ganassi Racing. The 02 and 01 Cadillac still trying to recover from a difficult ending up to the Rolex 24 in 6 races so far. Ganassi has actually won half of them. The 02 at Sebring and the 01 swept the street courses at Long Beach and Belle Isle, but there's been some inconsistency in the races they haven't won. Adam, is it surprising that Ganassi has won half of the races so far, but they're still that far behind in the championship?
Yes, Kobe, but in the DPI class, there's so much good competition among all the entries. So even though Chip Ganassi Racing has won half the races, you still have to take a look at its competition, especially with Meyer Shank Racing and Wayne Taylor Racing. Those 2 driver lineups are solid, especially over at Wayne Taylor Racing. You have Ricky Taylor and Felipe Albuquerque, and those 2 have a lot of sports car experience among them. And Meyer Shank Racing, well, they have a lot of experience as well. So I am surprised that Chip Ganassi isn't leading the championship, but the DPI class has some really, really good competition. And it's nice to see the number 48 Ally Racing Action Express Cadillac DPI return this weekend. That driver lineup is really, really solid. So expect a lot of close racing in the DPI class at Watkins Glen.
Yeah, that number 48 Ally Cadillac back. Got Kamui Kobayashi, Mike Rockefeller, and Jimmy Johnson making his return to the IMSA WeatherTech SportsCar Championship after he missed the 12 hours of Sebring. As we all remember, the 12 hours of Sebring took place on the exact same weekend as the NTT IndyCar Series race at Texas Motor Speedway on that same weekend, where Jimmy Johnson scored his career best finish in IndyCar, 6th place, battling Scott Dixon there at the end for a top 5. That was a real good weekend for Jimmy Johnson. But I'm sure he's really excited to be returning to the cockpit of the Cadillac prototype. And speaking of Cadillac prototypes, yeah, I'm actually very surprised that Chip Ganassi Racing they've looked very dominant. They've had fast cars at most of the races, but despite the team between 01 and 02 winning half of the races so far, in the races they haven't won, as I mentioned, there's been some inconsistency there, and and it just goes to show you can be dominant, but if you're inconsistent in other races, that can really derail your championship hopes. When you look at the two Acura teams, Mark Shank Racing and Wayne Taylor Racing, although they haven't really dominated all the races like we've seen Ganassi and some of the crazy speed that Ganassi shown this year, they've still remained consistent and got some really solid finishes. Some of those outlier finishes are really hurting Ganassi, and I think if they really want to try to close the gap to the two Acura teams in the championship, they're not going to need any more mistakes, any more bad finishes moving forward, because believe it or not, after today's race at Watkins Glen, we only have 3 more races left in the DPI championship. So we'll be heading off to Canadian Tire Motorsports Park. Yeah, IMSA's returning to Canada for the first time in a couple of years, and then after that, got Road America, and then the season ending Motul Petit Le Mans. So time is actually running out for Chip Ganassi Racing to try to gain on the two Acuras at the top of the championship. And while the season-long DPI title is close between the Acuras, the Michelin Endurance Cup is something else to fight for, with this being the third endurance race of the season. JDC Miller Motorsports drivers Richard Westbrook and Lloyd Duvall are fifth in the overall title battle, but they're leading the endurance standings by 2 points over Ricky Taylor, Felipe Albuquerque, Mike Conway, and Pippo Durrani. The Mustang Sampling and Wheeling Engineering Cadillacs haven't had the strongest season so far in 6 races, but collecting good points at Daytona and Sebring have put them in a good position to fight in the Endurance Cup. Does this boost morale for these teams, especially since they still have something to fight for?
Absolutely, Kobe. I do believe that the Michelin Endurance Cup will go to either JDC Miller Motorsports or possibly the Wheeling Engineering Cadillac DPI. And the JDC Miller Motorsports driver lineup is solid. Richard Westbrook and Lloyd Duvall have raced all across the world in sports car racing, so they have plenty of experience. But if they want to win this, they're going to have to hold off 4 really talented drivers, Ricky Taylor and Felipe Albuquerque over at Wayne Taylor Racing, Mike Conway and Pippo Durrani over at Wheeling Engineering. But to me, I can see JDC Miller Motorsports finding a way to win the Michelin Endurance Cup. They may be 5th in the regular standings, but if they can win this Michelin Endurance Cup, they can say, hey, we beat some of the best in these endurance races. So this does really good for them going into the race today at Watkins Glen.
And before we move on, I actually want to correct a mistake. I misspoke and said that Lloyd Duvall and Richard Westbrook were fifth in the championship. It's actually not Lloyd Duvall because he's just in for the endurance races. It's actually Westbrook and Tristan Vautier who are actually fifth in the championship. So apologies for that. Yeah, Lloyd Duvall just running endurance races, and Vautier's in the lineup full time. So certainly want to apologize for that mistake. But getting back to the question itself, I think this is certainly a strong boost in morale, especially for Wheeling Engineering racing that Action Express race number 31. That's the defending DPI champions. As we remember, thinking back to last year, the championship came down to the final lap, heading into the final turn. That was a really, really crazy battle at the end between, I think it was Wayne Taylor Racing and Action Express Racing there. Felipe Nasr really sent it, going downhill to the checkered flag, and he was able to get the DPI championship for him and Pippo Durrani. But for some reason, things haven't really been working out well at Action Express Racing. We know Felipe Nasr left the team to become a Porsche factory driver. He's gonna be racing with the Porsche Lmdh program next year. We'll talk a little bit about that later in the program. And since Felipe Nasr left that team, it seemed like Action Express have really dropped off a lot this year. Pippo Durrani is way down in the driver standings. You're looking at the standings right here. Pippo Durrani is currently sixth in the standings, and he has an uphill climb to try to get up further in the championship. And right now, it doesn't look like he's going to be able to repeat as IMSA DPI champion. And we've seen Action Express make a change in the driver lineup. Tristan Nunez is out, and they put in Olivier Pla there as Pippo Durrani's full time pilot for the rest of the season to see if they can try to get some more speed out of the car. I don't know if Action Express has made some moves in personnel or anything like that besides Felipe Nasr moving on them and then dropping Tristan Nunez from the driver's seat. Don't really know what's going on there, but this is certainly not the same Action Express team we saw last year that was very strong and dominant. And this year, it seems like they're just really struggling. And it's been a real surprise to see Pippo and the whole organization not be able to get the results that we know that they're capable of. But looking where they are right now in the Endurance Cup, although the full season championship seems to be a loss at this point, they're still in it for this Michelin Endurance Cup, and that can give them a lot of motivation entering Watkins Glen this afternoon. And like DPI, we only have 7 LMP2 cars. The Michelin Endurance Cup battle is only separated by a single point. PR1 Matheson Motorsport versus Racing Team Nederland. Ben Keaton, Mikkel Jensen, and Scott Huffaker are leading Fritz Van Erd, Gita Van de Garde, and Dylan Murray. But the entry that has everyone talking is the number 81, Dragon Speed Orca. Gentleman driver Henry Kedman is bringing back the father and son duo, Juan Pablo Montoya and Sebastian Montoya, after Sebastian really impressed a lot of people at Sebring before his father was involved in a unfortunate race-ending crash. Will today's LMP2 class winner be one of those 3 cars?
Absolutely, Kobe. And the last team you mentioned, I think, has a really good shot of taking class victory. That Dragon Speed Orca, last time out, I do believe Juan Montoya and Hendrik Hedman won at Mid Ohio. So that car has some momentum going for him going into here at Watkins Glen. To me, after, what we're seeing in that Dragon Speed Orca, having the father and son duo return, I think that is a really cool story. Sebastian Montoya is racing over Europe, so it's an off weekend for him. So to get the chance over here to come race with his dad and Hendrik Hedman and Watkins Glen, and I think the Dragon Speed Orca is a favorite, but I wouldn't count out the team with Ben Keating, Mikkel Jensen, and Scott Huffaker. They also have a lot of talent among those 3. So to me, I think the Dragon Speed Orca car, after what we saw at Sebring with Sebastian impressing a lot of people, I think that's the car to beat here at Watkins Glen.
Yeah, and I'm sure this time they're really going to hope that they'll be able to run the entire show. This time, it was unfortunate that Juan Pablo Montoya was taken out in that crash early in the 12 hours of Sebring, because it would have been interesting to see what both Montoyas could have done, deep into the race, and if they were in contention for the win. Sebastian Montoya really impressing a lot of people. It's going to be a lot of fun following his career and see where he's going to end up, possibly on the road to Formula One. But if that doesn't work out, based on the raw speed that he showed so far, I'm sure the NTT IndyCar Series would love to have another Montoya out there competing for wins and championships for many years to come in American open wheel racing. But I agree with you, Adam. I think today's LMP2 Class 1 will certainly come from one of those 3 prototypes: PR1 Matheson, Racing Team Nederland, or Dragon Speed. I'm not sure which one is going to win, but the competition in LMP2, I think, is going to be really intense. And I wish the TV coverage would show the LMP2 class more often. I really feel like that's one of the things lacking on the broadcast. I feel like that they kind of skip over LMP2, and to be honest, you wouldn't really know it was there I feel like LMP2 just don't get the proper coverage that it should. And moving on from LMP2 to an 11 car strong LMP3 class, Sean Creech Motorsport leads Raleigh Motorsports by 2 points in the Michelin Endurance Cup. Core Autosport is 7 points back. A strong lineup of Colin Braun, John Bennett, and George Kurtz. Ironically, Braun and Kurtz drove together as teammates in GT World Challenge America. They entered Watkins Glen with some momentum. Both drivers got a Pro-Am class victory last weekend at Virginia International Raceway in that series. Do you see Core Autosport closing the gap to Sean Creech Motorsport in the Endurance Cup?
I do, Kobe. And that lineup for Core Autosports is solid, and solid. Colin Braun has a lot of experience in sports car racing. John Bennett and George Kurtz. You mentioned Colin Braun and George Kurtz raced last weekend over at Virginia International Raceway. So it gives them momentum coming here into the Sahlen 6 hours of the Glen. So I do believe we will see Core Autosport close the gap to Sean Creech Motorsport when the checkered flag falls.
Yeah, I agree with you on that as well. Core Autosport, they have a super strong driver lineup, as you mentioned. I know John Bennett didn't race last weekend, but Colin Braun, George Kurtz, they were behind the wheel of a Mercedes AMG GT3 for the CrowdStrike team, and they were able to get the victory in the second race of the weekend at VR GT World Challenge America after Ashton Harrison in the Racer's Edge Motorsports Acura NSX GT3. She was leading within the last 10 minutes of the race, and she dropped the wheel off course and spun out, cost her the Pro-Am class victory. And then it was George Kurtz who was just able to drive through and pass her as she was turned around backwards to get the class win. So a very opportunistic win for George Kurtz and Colin Braun in race two. But I'm sure they're also going to be in the position to win today at Watkins Glen. Core Autosport is a top-notch organization. This is the same Core Autosport that ran the former Porsche Factory GT program in the IMSA WeatherTech SportsCar Championship. They used to compete in the old GTLM class, and Colin Brown, John Bennett. They've been a real strong duo for so many years in IMSA competition. I remember when they were dominating the Prototype Challenge Series, winning a lot of races there, and then they stepped up to then they stepped up to, I believe, they ran Nissan DPI, that they ran that Pro-Am driver lineup and did a really good job against all the all pro driver lineups in the top category. So Core Autosport, they certainly know how to get the job done. It would not surprise me if they get the job done later today in upstate New York. And we have 7 entries in the GTD Pro category and 7 different manufacturers as well. And represented, you have Corvette, Porsche, Lexus, Aston Martin, BMW, Ferrari, and Mercedes. In the season-long championship, 5 motorsport Porsche drivers, Matthew Jomine and Matt Campbell, lead the Corvette duo, Antonio Garcia and Jordan Taylor, by a total of 50 points. However, roles will reverse in the Endurance Cup, with Corvette leading Faf by a total of 4 points. Tied for second with fast in endurance points, the number 62, Risi Competizione Ferrari. Risi was fast at Daytona, especially during the nighttime hours, before fading later in the Rolex 24, but still managed to finish second. They got the pole mechanical issue put them out of the race. Davide Rigon and Daniel Serra are looking to keep themselves in contention for the endurance title. Does Risi have a good shot at defeating Corvette and Faf in GTD Pro later today at Watkins Glen?
They do, Kobe. But that Corvette duo is strong. Antonio Garcia and Jordan Taylor have raced the Corvette for a long time. And Faf Motorsports, they have 2 absolute strong Porsche drivers, Matt Campbell and Matthew Jomine. And so to me, I give Risi Competizione about a 55 to 65% shot at winning, but I don't think they win. I think it's either going to be Corvette Racing or Faf Motorsports. And if I had to choose and if I had to choose a team who I think will win, I'm going to say Fast Motorsports. Matt Campbell, Matthew Jomine are looking strong in that Porsche, and we'll talk about Matt Campbell and Matthew Jomine a little bit later on as well.
Yeah, we'll be talking about them. It's actually just right around the corner in the segment after this next one. But Reese Competizione, I give them a really good chance of winning. They certainly had a great chance of winning Daytona until towards the end. They're still able to finish run up there after the two Porsches collided. That was a really great finish to the Rolex 24. It was the number 9 Fast Porsche and then the KCMG Porsche. That was a really thrilling battle. I think, although the Rolex 24 was one of the first major races of the 2022 racing season, I still think the battle between the two Porsches in GTD Pro was some of the best racing we've seen all year long. And GTD Pro has certainly lived up to all the hype so far since switching over from the GTLM category. But Reese's, as I mentioned, looked very strong. I think David Rigon, Daniel Serra coming off running the 24 Hours of Le Mans. I think they're going to look to try to keep the good times rolling, and also with the entire Reese Competizione group. And I think they can possibly get the job done and go to victory lane today at Watkins Glen. But the competition with Corvette Racing, Pfaff, and others is certainly going to be a dogfight. But Reese is ready for it. And in the GTD class, 16 cars and the Michelin Endurance Cup standings have the top four within 4 points of the lead. The Inception Racing McLaren is leading the Endurance Cup standings with Brendan Reed, Jordan Pepper, and Ollie Milroy. They're tied with the AF Corsa Ferrari drivers for the top spot. Luis Perez Compoc, Tony Vilander, and Simon Mann. Then 2 points back, you have Wright Motorsports, Jan Halen, Ryan Hartwick, and Zachary Robichon. But Allegra Motorsports isn't entered in today's race despite being fourth in the Endurance Cup and 4 points back. Which GTD teams will you be keeping a close eye on throughout the race?
One team that I'm going to be looking out for, Kobe, is Wright Motorsports. That driver lineup is really good, and you have so much experience with them. Jan Halen, for people who may not know, used to compete in the series, what we call IndyCar, once known as the Champ Car World Series. So even though it's an open wheel car, he still has loads of experience. Ryan Hardwick and Zachary Robichon are really solid co-drivers. And you mentioned the AF Corsa Ferrari team. That driver lineup is really, really good too. Tony Vilander is a name you've heard of for a long time. Simon Mann and Luis Perez Compact are really good too. So I have to say the AF Corsa Ferrari and Wright Motorsports.
Yeah, those are definitely some really good picks, Adam. And one of the teams I'm going to be watching is Paul Miller Racing. They were able to get their new BMW M4 GT3 really late in this. Well, not really late. It was just after the Rolex 24. They weren't able to run the Rolex this year, so they started behind in the season-long championship. So that basically killed their hopes of winning the season-long championship and also the Michelin Endurance Cup, but they certainly have a shot at getting the Sprint Cup title. So there's that, and it was really impressive to see how quickly Paul Miller Racing was able to get adapted to the BMW. And thinking back to the Rolex 24 at Daytona, when BMW rolled off the truck, they were slow, they weren't competitive at all. Even the two Ray Hall Letterman Lanigan BMWs that have run it as the factory operation for such a long time. They were slow as well. And if the Ray Hall operation is slow, and that means everybody else is going to be slow too. And that's how it was at Daytona with Turner Motorsport when they ran the BMW. And then everybody showed up to Sebring, and it looked like there was a massive improvement all across the board. In Paul Miller Racing, you couldn't really tell they changed cars because it seemed like they didn't really skip a beat at all. So I certainly think that's one of the teams that could be in contention. And another car I think that's certainly going to be leading the season long GTD driver standings, Stephen McAleer in the number 32 Mercedes 14 Cor- Corthroff. Yeah, with his co-drivers Mike Skeen and Dirk Mueller. Think that's going to be a really strong lineup to pay attention to. And another lineup I think could potentially be an underdog. The Magnus race, and they're running their endurance races this year, not running full time. Andy Lally, John Potter, Spencer Pompelli. That's certainly a real interesting group of characters right there. And I think that Magnus Aston Martin could certainly get the job done at Watkins Glen. There's a lot of competition, a lot of great teams in GTD, and I'm sure they're really going to put on a great show, just like the All Pro GTD Pro class. And next we're going to be moving on to some news and notes, rapid fire style. So earlier today, Porsche Penske Motorsport unveiled the Porsche 963 Lmdh prototype. It'll race in the FIA World Endurance Championship and IMSA WeatherTech SportsCar Championship. 4 Porsches, 2 entered in each championship, going for the overall win in the WC Hypercar class and IMSA's GTP class. The WC team will be based in Germany, while the IMSA operation will run out of the Team Penske shop in Mooresville, North Carolina. Although no driver pairings were announced a couple of days ago. As you can see in the graphic from Porsche Penske Motorsport, here are the factory drivers that'll drive this prototype on both sides of the Atlantic: Dane Cameron, Matt Campbell, Michael Christensen, Kevin Estra, Matthew Jomine, Andre Lauderer, Felipe Nasr, and Lawrence Van Thor. So certainly a lot of heavyweights there that Team Penske and Porsche have signed for this operation. Adam, what are your thoughts on the official reveal of the Porsche 963 Lmdh and the drivers they chose?
Kobe, the driver lineup is absolutely solid all over. You have drivers who have competed in these type of cars in the past. Andre Lauderer, he used to compete for Audi, and you know how good they were over at Le Mans. Matt Campbell and Matthew Jomine, we just talked about them at FAF Motorsports, and now they're coming over here to compete in this new prototype. It may it's going to be, like we've mentioned earlier, we are now entering a golden age of sports car racing, and this driver lineup is solid all over. So if I was the IMSA drivers and the World Endurance Championship drivers for next year, I would watch out, because those Porsches are going to be going after overall wins and the championship. This is it's going to be an awesome 2023 IMSA season and FIA World Endurance Championship season. We're now entering a true golden age of sports car racing.
Yeah, it really sounds like we're a broken record at this point, because how many times have we said we're in a true golden age of sports car racing? But just from my memory, we've really said that many times on our Grid Network program, and it's true. I mean, looking at that Porsche 963 Lmdh prototype, it's certainly quite a beauty they have, especially the color choice. The chose really reminds me of the old Team Penske Team Marlboro colors. That's what it really that's what it really looks like. And it's gonna be interesting to see how this car performs. But knowing Team Penske, knowing Porsche, probably gonna be extremely fast and competitive right out of the gate. And they've already been testing it in Europe, and they've moved the car over. And in the summer, I believe coming up, they're going to be testing the car in America, and getting that ready to go for 2023. Test on the European tracks already done, and next test on the American tracks, and then they'll be ready to go when the Rolex 24 at Daytona it's gonna be coming up fast in January 2023. And looking at all the drivers, they certainly got some extremely fast drivers, some world class drivers in those lineups, and I think Porsche certainly did a solid job picking the drivers for this Lmdh operation on both sides of the Atlantic. And while Porsche didn't announce like which drivers are going to be in IMSA and which are in the World Endurance Championship, I might take an educated guess where I think the drivers are going to land based on how much he loves IMSA. I think Felipe Nasr is going to be in IMSA, and also Dane Cameron as well, since he's raced the majority of his sports car racing career in the IMSA WeatherTech SportsCar Championship. I think Cameron and Nasr more than likely going to be racing the Porsches in IMSA. As for the second one, maybe Matthew Jominy and Matt Campbell will stay together in racing the IMSA WeatherTech SportsCar Championship because they're both the Porsche factory drivers driving for FAF Motorsports and GTD Pro this year. So it'll be interesting to see if Porsche keeps them together. And looking at the World Endurance Championship, since Andre Lauderer has experience in that championship on those World Endurance Championship tracks, and as you mentioned, Adam Lauderer competed for Audi, I could certainly see him in the World Endurance Championship. Same thing for Michael Christensen, who's been over there as well, and also for Kevin Estra, and more than likely Lawrence Van Thor. While that's certainly not the official lineup, but based on using what I know about these drivers and the series that they've been in, I feel like that probably makes the most sense in my opinion. And let us know in the chat room below if you agree with my assessment. And moving on to our next story, Toyota Gazoo Racing told SportsCar 365 they currently don't have any plans to race in IMSA. This came after rumors started swirling that they plan to introduce a significant upgrade to their current hypercar or build a brand new hypercar to keep up with all of the competition that's going to be coming into the World Endurance Championship starting next season. Actually, more competition coming up soon because we're gonna have the WC race at Monza, and Peugeot is gonna be making their World Endurance Championship return. So really excited to see Peugeot come back to top flight sports car racing. So Adam, would Toyota's presence in IMSA's GTP category be a big deal, and do you think they'll eventually change their mind?
Well, to let our viewers know, in the original GTP era, Toyota was really dominant before it went over to the World Sports Car Championship class. Not in 92 and 93, Toyota was entered and it had cars that were fielded by Dan Gurney's All-American racers, and they completely dominated in those 2 years. Some of the drivers that were in those cars were Juan Manuel Fangio II and Rocky Moran. If you go back and watch some classic IMSA races from 92 and 93, you'll see that Toyota was completely dominant. So it would be a shame if Toyota Gazoo Racing wasn't in IMSA. I think they're making a really big mistake because we've seen how good Toyota Gazoo Racing is in the FIA World Endurance Championship. And to see him not racing IMSA, going up against those drivers and cars, it would be a shame. Hopefully, Toyota Gazoo Racing will change their mind and come compete in IMSA because it gives the rest of the drivers and cars some really good competition going forward.
Well, Adam, I think it's a little too soon to rule out Toyota coming over to the IMSA GTP class. I know 2023 is certainly going to be a big year on both sides of the Atlantic with this new prototype class racing all across the world. But I think it's certainly way too soon to count out Toyota racing in IMSA. I understand, if it's like 2023, it's a brand new year for everyone involved. They still want to focus on the World Endurance Championship, and of course they may bring a significant upgrade to their current hypercar, or they might even build a brand new hypercar. So there's certainly a lot to think about there. But I'm sure down the road that we could possibly see a Toyota racing IMSA. Maybe it'll just be a one-off at the Rolex 24 at Daytona, and then we won't see them the rest of the year, or maybe they decide to run full time in IMSA, or even give their hypercar to a customer to run as well. But I certainly think it would be a great thing for sports car racing all over the world if Toyota was able to race in the WeatherTech Sports Car Championship, especially on the high banks of Daytona. And I know on Grid Tonight earlier in the week we were talking about Sebastian Ogier wanted to impress Toyota so he'd get a hypercar seat at the 24 Hours of Le Mans, since Toyota might run a third car in 2023. And my idea would be, hey, bring your hypercar to the Rolex 24 in January 2023 and put Sebastian Ogier in it there. And I think that would be a good way to evaluate Ogier in a low pressure environment where he's not going to be going for the championship. Be a really good learning opportunity for Ogier in the Toyota hypercar in racing conditions. And if he performs well, right, right on the pace and setting some really good lap times, that could be a great test to see if he's worthy to race that Toyota hypercar at Le Mans. So that's just my 2 cents there. And Jack Hawksworth, he's going to miss his second consecutive race after getting injured in a motocross accident. IndyCar driver Kyle Kirkwood and Ben Barnicoat will team up again. That driver won the GTD class last time out at Belle Isle Park in Detroit, but this time they'll be in GTD Pro against all pro driver lineups. Will it be more challenging for Barnicoat and Kirkwood to win in this class?
Yes, Kobe, it will be very challenging because they're going up against some real good talent in GTD, and we talked about it earlier. Fast Motorsports, which hires Matt Campbell, Matthew Jomine. You have the Racing Competition Unit, Ferrari. You have Corvette Racing with Antonio Garcia, Jordan Taylor. So to me, I think it's going to be very challenging for Ben Barnicoat and Kyle Kirkwood. I do believe that they'll have a solid finish, but they're going up against some of the best in GTD. So to me, it's going to be challenging for those two drivers here at Watkins Glen.
Yeah, although GTD has a lot more cars, GTD Pro, just 7 cars, 7 different manufacturers. I think it's going to be extremely competitive and certainly a tougher challenge for Barnicoat and Kirkwood. So far, Vasser Sullivan Racing hasn't been able to put the Lexus at the top step of the podium in GTD Pro so far this year. They've had the success in the regular GTD class, but the Pro class has been a different story. But behind the Corvette and the Fast Porsche, it's been like Vassar Sullivan's been up there, like right behind them, and they're trying to move forward and try to break through. I think if the stars align, that could potentially be in contention for the win today. But certainly, it's going to be a lot tougher going up against the All Pro driver lineups versus the Pro Am ones. And Corvette Racing had a difficult 24 Hours of Le Mans a couple of weeks ago. Neither Corvette ended up finishing the race, but the number 64 Corvette was leading and got taken out by a prototype in a crash. A heartbreaking final race of Le Mans in the All-Pro GT category with factory-backed teams. Antonio Garcia and Jordan Taylor returned to the number 3 Corvette this weekend and look to keep building some positive momentum. Well, at least on the IMSA side of things. Can Corvette bounce back from a heartbreaker at Le Mans and get the win at the Glen?
I do believe that they will bounce back, Kobe, but I don't anticipate Corvette getting the win, even though Antonio Garcia and Jordan Taylor are two strong drivers. They're going up against Fab Motorsports, Porsche team with Matthew Jomine and Matt Campbell. I think Corvette Racing gets on the podium, but I don't think they'll win.
Well, I think Corvette Racing is going to have a really good shot to win. I'm not going to make a prediction for GTD Pro of who could potentially get the job done and win, but I certainly think Corvette is going to be in the mix. IMSA's, obviously their bread and butter. They have a lot many laps at Watkins Glen. They have a lot of data to look at, and it's going to certainly be a lot different for them this year. Obviously, since their Corvette GTD Pro car is modified to fit to fit the regulations of this category, and it's certainly gonna be a little bit different for Jordan Taylor and Antonio Garcia on the technical side, but I'm sure they're going to be perfectly fine as I've already shown so far this season. And I think after I mean thinking back to Le Mans, that was an absolute heartbreaker. It led the number 64 Corvette was certainly going to be in a good spot to potentially win that race. And here comes the prototype, take them out of the race. It was no fault of their own. There was really like nothing they could do there. There was just an error on the driver. I believe at the time it was Francois Perrotta behind the wheel, and it was a really nice gesture that he went over to the Corvette garage after the crash and apologized to them and the higher ups there at General Motors. But obviously, yeah, it was great to see Francois apologize to them, but it still doesn't make up for the heartbreak that happened at Le Mans. And his Corvette can slowly start to recover from that disappointment at Le Mans by getting the job done and going out there and getting the win at Watkins Glen. I certainly think they're certainly going to be in the hunt. There's a lot of really strong teams in the GTD pro category going against Corvette. We already mentioned Fat Guy, Vassar Sullivan mentioned them, Reese Competizione, WeatherTech Racing, BMW Team RLL, and also the Heart of Racing, Aston Martin.
And now it's time for everybody's favorite game here at Grid Network. Pick a winner and use the hashtag Pick a Winner today on social media and let us know who you think is going to win the Sahlen's 6 Hours of the Glen. With that being said, all right, Kobe, it's time that we make our picks. So, who wins the 7th round of the 2022 IMSA WeatherTech SportsCar Series here at historic Watkins Glen in upstate New York?
Oh boy, it's really hard to pick a winner for this one because the DPI class is so close this weekend in upstate New York. But I think one of the Acuras is going to get it done. I believe this time I'm going to go with the winners of the Rolex 24. I think the number 60 Mershank Racing Acura DPI is going to get the job done and win the 76 hour gun. Oliver Drivers, Tom Blomqvist. I think it's going to be a really happy day for Mershank.
Well, I'm trying to catch you for pick winner. So I'm going with the number 10 Wayne Taylor racing car of Felipe Albuquerque and Ricky Taylor. I think they will come through in the end. And some of the keys that I'm going to be looking out for in the race today, one of them is the weather. It's going to be really hot up there in Watkins Glen, so the drivers are going to have to deal with the close to 90-degree heat. They're going to have to stay hydrated all throughout the race, and there is potential of rain sometime later on that day. So if it does rain, that could be a really good equalizer throughout the 6 hour race. And you got to look out for the DPI class. It is strong all around. So Kobe, what are some of your keys to the Sahlen's 6 Hours of the Glen today at Watkins Glen?
Patience. You can't win the race going into turn one up the hill into the S's on the very first lap, but you can certainly lose it on the first lap, as we saw in the 24 Hours of Le Mans a couple of weeks ago. I'm sure the drivers from United Autosports were not happy with how that started. As we saw, United Autosports they got taken out of contention there. One of their cars did. And it was lap one, turn one, and I know that is just very frustrating, especially since it was a 24-hour race, and this is obviously much shorter 6 hour event, but patience is still going to be key. Make sure you're not pushing hard. Try to limit your mistakes and make sure you're in the right place at the right time when it really matters. I think patience is going to be key, and that certainly applies to traffic as well. We have a lot more cars this year at Watkins Glen than we've seen in the last few years, so those DPI drivers are certainly going to have to be paying attention, man, getting through GT traffic and LMP3 traffic as well in much slower categories. And I know the GT drivers and the prototype driver, they often get really angry at each other because the GT drivers, they don't like it when the DPIs, are slicing and dicing through their field, and sometimes, they get hit or like run off course by those prototypes, and vice and vice versa. DPI drivers, get frustrated with the GTs as well. So I think the real key to winning this race is certainly going to be being patient, make sure you're at the right place at the right time, and limit mistakes. So basically, the key to winning any of these races, yeah, I know it's a 6 hour endurance race, but it seems like a lot of these endurance events are really sprint races nowadays because everybody is pushing every single lap like it's the final lap of the race. And Watkins Glen is certainly a high speed circuit and a little room for error. You make sure you certainly don't want to get it wrong in the S's, because if you hit a guardrail, that's going to be a really hard accident there. And then going through the bus stop, we need to be careful through there. And a fan favorite, certainly the boot is a real fun section at Watkins Glen. I know NASCAR runs the short chute instead of the boot. A lot of people keep asking, when is NASCAR going to run the boot? I'm not sure if they ever will, but for all the people who are a big fan of the boot at Watkins Glen, be sure to enjoy it this weekend for 6 hours of racing today. And with that said, we're out of time for our IMSA pre-race program. So we want to remind all of our viewers, please be sure to like and subscribe to Good Network here on YouTube. You can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. We encourage you to take 5 minutes after our show and consider joining our Patreon page, invest in the Grid Network well into the future. Big shout out to Colin, Mark, D Shell, and Robin for investing in GRIDnet. We really appreciate everything you do for us. Do you want to buy me a coffee? Click the link in the video description below. You can buy a drink for your favorite on air talent at GRIDnet. Can't talk this morning. Big thank you to Edward Hunter from Formula Zone, Amber and Zachary for buying us one. We greatly appreciate it. Any amount will continue helping growing our motorsports media outlet. Visit public.com, also known as the stock market social media home. Click the link below and referral code GRIDnet to give you $5 to invest immediately. Polo.com allows you to connect with your friends. You can make new friends and use tools to learn how to properly invest in the stock market. Adam and I will see you later tonight on Grid Live Wrap Up after the NASCAR Cup Series race at Nashville Super Speedway. Online coverage of the 6 hour endurance race at Watkins Glen kicks off on Peacock Streaming with a green flag dropping around 10:40 a.m. Eastern Time. But at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, you'll have the option of watching the race on USA Network until the end, or you can just stay on Peacock as you are. But the race will end at 4:40 p.m. Eastern Time, ending at a perfect time to enjoy some stock car racing in the Music City. For Adam Lemerise, I'm Kobe Lambeth from the Podium Finish. Thank you for watching and enjoy the Sahlen 6 hours of the Glen.